Canada's population has soared by more than 1.2 million people over the past 12 months. Our guest says the pop in population could worsen the housing shortfall by more than 500,000 units in just 2 years.
It's no secret that Canadians are feeling stretched.
I stopped going out and I don't even have Wi-Fi anymore.
The costs and the crime that Trudeau's policies have unleashed make this country unlivable.
The issue of immigration in Canada has taken on an almost sacred status over time. Any talk of the costs related to immigration is quickly labeled as either racist or anti-Canadian. But as Canada faces the potential of significant ongoing deficits, it's crucial to have a frank discussion about the current immigration policy without holding anything back. In today's video, we will talk about the obsessive immigrant addiction infecting Canada and why it's a lose-lose situation for the Canadian-borns. Canada has a long-standing tradition of welcoming immigrants into its fold dating back to its early years. In the 19th century, European immigrants sought refuge in Canada in the pursuit of a better life, contributing significantly to the nation's economic growth and infrastructure development. The 20th century witnessed the arrival of immigrants from Asia and Africa, further enriching Canada's cultural diversity and playing a pivotal role in its progress. In recent times, Canada has maintained its commitment to an immigration policy of historic proportions. Last year, the federal government announced an ambitious plan to admit 500,000 immigrants annually by 2025, which translates to approximately 1.5 million new immigrants over the next 3 years. But Canadian authorities do not realize that immigration, which used to be a walk in the park, has turned into a complete mess. The levels of immigration are off the charts and totally unreasonable. Before we dive into why this surging immigration feels like a huge insult to the locals, let's first explore why Canada insists on bringing in more and more immigrants. For many years, Canada has been striving to bring in permanent residents, those who can stick around indefinitely but aren't quite citizens. In the past year, they decided to go all out and welcomed a whopping 405,000 of them, setting a dubious record. The reason behind this frenzy seems like a grim equation. Canada is grappling with the challenges of an aging population and a declining birth rate, much like its Western counterparts. In essence, if Canada wants to grow instead of collapse, it has to keep importing immigrants. The immigrant workforce has already become the crutch for Canada, and it's projected to be the only hope for population growth. Shockingly, 1 in 4 Canadians is now an immigrant, for surpassing the figures in other G7 nations. Compare this to the United States, which despite its melting pot reputation, only has 14% immigrants. What's more, Canada is a standout in the Western world for its focus on economic immigration. Nearly half of its permanent residents are chosen for their skills, not their family ties, and they're aiming to push that figure to 60% by 2025. But why the sudden surge? Well, it appears Canada is in a healthcare crisis, particularly a dire shortage of nurses. This has prompted them to pull out all the stops, get innovative, and recruit heavily. Even Toronto, the nation's largest city, is struggling with acute shortages of medical professionals. The situation seems pretty dire, to say the least.
Canada's government is aiming for roughly 60% of newcomers to be in the economic class.
We are currently in a healthcare crisis and in a significant nursing shortage. So we really needed to get creative and innovative.
The issue here is that immigrants receive benefits and incentives that Native Canadians are often denied. It's like a one-sided deal where new immigrants get a whole bunch of perks. They're handed a furniture allowance that covers essential items like tables, chairs, sofas, and beds, a treat that common Canadians don't get. The local IRCC decides whether to provide this allowance by giving funds to immigrants to buy furniture, establish a deal with a supplier, or using a combination of both. And that's not all. Immigrants also get a one-time linens allowance, a basic household needs allowance, and even a staple allowance to set up their households with cleaning supplies and basic food. They even get a utility allowance covering things like internet and telephone connection fees, which is a luxury that the average Canadian might envy. The list goes on and on with allowances for funerals, newborns, and maternity. It's as if immigrants are given a welcome package while common Canadians are left wondering why they're footing the bill for all these perks. It's like a treat for immigrants, all at the expense of the hardships faced by everyday Canadians, and the question lingers, why? It's a downright disastrous situation for our own nationals, the locals who have poured their heart and soul into Canada. When these immigrants flood in, sure, they might give the economy a little nudge, but what about the housing catastrophe they bring? You see, with this influx, housing prices shoot up into the stratosphere. Rents, they skyrocket, and it's like daylight robbery. The regular folks can't find affordable places to live, and the result is heart-wrenching. People struggling, tears flowing, and it doesn't stop there. Homelessness becomes a grim reality. And as for the nursing crisis, sure, the immigrants might lend a hand, but the entire healthcare system is a sinking ship. The more they come, the more it gets overwhelmed. Your average Canadian family is coughing up almost $16,000 for healthcare this year. As if that's not enough, inflation keeps soaring, and Canadians are losing sleep over the ever-increasing costs of living and their household budgets. But more people in the mix means more prices going through the roof. It's an economic mess, and it's baffling that the Trudeau government isn't seeing it. Basic necessities like eggs, bread, and rice have shot up by a jaw-dropping 120% since last year. It's a full-blown nightmare, a relentless collapse, and it's soul-crushing to witness this sorry state of affairs. But no one in power seems to be listening. The surging immigration levels are piling yet another heavy burden on the shoulders of the locals, and this time it's the grim specter of poverty. Shockingly, 1 in 5 single adults in Canada is living in the clutches of poverty. As more and more immigrants flood the job market, they're often willing to work for lower wages, making it even tougher for those born in Canada to make ends meet. This economic equation becomes an absolute hell for Canadians, especially in a post-pandemic world where prices are already soaring to unimaginable heights. The result? A survival battle in a collapsing economy where it's becoming increasingly difficult for Canadian-born citizens to keep their heads above water. Different regions in Canada have their own views on immigration. When the government revealed its big plan to bring in up to 500,000 new immigrants each year, Quebec, which has the autonomy to set its immigration quotas, decided it would only take in a maximum of 50,000 per year. This means that despite having 23% of the country's population, Quebec would only be getting 10% of the country's immigrants. Quebec Premier François Legault expressed concerns that more immigrants could dilute the importance of the French language in the province. In a survey of 1,537 Canadians done by Ledger and the Association of Canadian Studies, 3 out of 4 people said they were somewhat or very concerned about the impact of the new plan on housing and social services. Almost half, 49%, thought the immigration targets were too high, while 31% considered them just right. What's more, Canadian taxpayers have to carry the load for this unlimited family immigration. There's been a lot of talk from politicians, the media, and immigrant advocates about the government's plan to cut back on parents and grandparents joining their immigrant children in Canada next year. Now the policy change may seem unfair. Many immigrants came to Canada with the promise that their parents and grandparents could come too, helping them maintain their cultural traditions and providing assistance with chores and child-rearing. However, just like with any government policy, when one group benefits, it often means that another group pays the price. In this case, the benefits for immigrants come at the cost of Canadian taxpayers. Unfortunately, these costs aren't clearly visible in government budgets. They're hidden within the welfare state system, and they're largely driven by the fact that recent immigrants tend to earn less. New data and studies reveal just how much of a financial burden this is. Recent immigrants continue to have lower average incomes and pay less in taxes compared to other Canadians, even a decade after they arrive. At the same time, these immigrants on average make use of at least the same amount of social benefits as other Canadians. The pressing question remains, will the government take meaningful action? If not, it may be high time for Canadians to advocate for their rights and demand a new social contract. A proposed system envisions a scenario where prospective immigrants, equipped with job offers, are granted temporary work visas initially valid for 2 years and renewable for an additional 2 years upon demonstrating sustained employment. After a cumulative 4-year period of continued work in Canada, holders of these work visas would become eligible for landed immigrant status with the opportunity to apply for citizenship 2 years later. Additionally, the system would accommodate the spouses and dependents of work visa holders through a family work visa program, enabling them to engage in employment opportunities. In a comprehensive approach, immigrants would also have the opportunity to reunite with their parents and grandparents in Canada as landed immigrants, contingent upon posting a bond to cover healthcare and other social benefits. Only through such a framework can justice be effectively served. Otherwise, there is a risk that the Canadian-born population may find themselves grappling with hardships, setbacks, and despair, unable to secure the quality of life they deserve. If you like this video and want to learn more about how immigration is contributing to Canada's transformation into a third-world country, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you, please consider liking, liking, subscribing, and sharing the video. Thanks for watching.